record. There we go.
Such an amazing privilege to be here with you. Driving past Ladies Mile this afternoon brought back many memories from way back. 1972 was when we left here to move to the Transvaal. But it's so wonderful to realize that we are located. We are found beyond where GPS can trace us. I lost my laptop yesterday in Nando's Long Street. When I got back, I remembered that with iCloud you can actually now trace it, but I didn't activate it. But it's still there somewhere on this planet. But I'm so glad that we can declare this morning that once I was lost, but now I'm found. And God, the finding once and for all in one person. God is not in the process of finding people that are really hiding out in the outskirts, Humanity stands fully represented in Jesus Christ. He is the one who, in the mystery that was hidden for ages and generations, unveiled to our logic the logic of God, the eternal knowing of the God who declared to Jeremiah in chapter 1 and verse 5, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. I'm so glad that our salvation, our redemption carries a history to it larger than calendar time. There's an eternity that fully sanctions the integrity of humankind's salvation. When in Hebrews chapter 13 we read that Jesus was the same yesterday and today and forever, then everything that his name declares concerning mankind's redemption carries with it a yesterday beyond time. We can reflect on fading memories, but there's an eternity that backs your redemption. Why would God bother to so engage with fallen humanity if man's lost state would even reduce man's original value, let alone delete it? If the lost coin carried enough value to justify the act of the woman lighting the lamp in the house. I'm so glad when I read Luke 15 to discover that the coin was still in the house. Someone once said to me he had this dream that he lost his car keys in the house, but then the electricity was off in the house, and he was looking everywhere in the dark and he couldn't find anything. Then he noticed that outside in the street lamp was still going strong. So he thought, well, that's a good idea. Let me go and look with the light of the street lamp. So he began to look within the circle of the street lamp's light, looking diligently to try and find his lost keys. And then his neighbor stopped and said, what are you looking for? He says, I lost my keys. So his neighbor helped and they started looking. And then eventually the neighbor said, where did you lose the keys? He says, I lost it in the house, but we don't have any light there. And so often we look in the wrong place. You see, it's not the sincerity of our looking that guarantees our finding. Paul finds a group of Greek philosophers very sincerely pursuing their next best guess about God in Acts chapter 17. And Paul says to them, guys, sorry to announce this, or glad to announce this, but you've been looking in the wrong spot. You're not going to find God in your next best artistic expression, your next great carving, your shrine that you built, your next doctrine that you carve in your theology, in your idea, in your argument. He says the God, the maker of the heavens and the earth, the one who gives you your next breath, is not far from each one of us. Doesn't that language thrill you? Yeah. Imagine Paul's audience right there. Here he deals with a group of Greek philosophers involved in all kinds of ancient pagan ideas. Totally missed it. And Paul's not declaring to them, well, us Christians, and you poor lost unbelievers. You see, in the context of what Paul understands to have happened on humanity's behalf, when the God of creation took upon himself human form, Paul understood that Emmanuel could never be more Emmanuel to the Jew than what he is Emmanuel to the Gentile. He is not far from each one of us. Can you imagine how this one revelation would impact our evangelism? When we're dealing with folk, in Pick and Pay or at the golf course or at Newlands or wherever we are, wherever we find ourselves, to just live a life overwhelmed with the authentic integrity of every human life's value and identity. Back in Luke 15, Jesus also tells about the lost sheep. And immediately places the exact same value that the 99 sheep carries upon this one lost sheep. How many of you in business have a 99% return? You'd feel great, I'm doing exceptionally good business. But I'm so glad that God is such a precise God. He paid for 100. 99 will not make him feel, all right, you can afford to lose one. The one carries the exact same value. And so the good news, the glad tidings that is announced at the birth of our Christian calendar, 2012 years ago now. The glad tidings of great joy announces a joy that carries exactly the same persuasion, the same ingredient, the same effect, relevant to every human life. And so that makes the gospel extremely current. Because it means that the God of creation has never gone silent on the human race. We have recorded between the two books of the Bible, the Old and the New, 400 years of silence where there was no prophet in the land. All along, day to day. Psalm 19 says, day to day declares knowledge. Night to night utters wisdom. We're not dealing with a silent God, with a God economic with his words, because he has to squeeze his speech into an hour on a Sunday morning. But he's in constant conversation. And Paul is so bold as to say in Romans 1:19, whatever can be known of God is manifest in man. So through our wickedness we might suppress the truth, but it doesn't make the voice of God less manifest. We're not dealing with the voice of God, we're dealing with language in its most simple, most profound, most articulate form. I'm so glad that when John begins to write to us in the Gospel of John, he does this when he's already more than 90 years old. Remember, he was an illiterate fisherman in his young days. So now at 90 plus. So I encourage elderly people to get computer literate. You have much to say. When you draw from that source, John begins to write, and he's not trying to compete with Matthew and Luke's contribution, where Matthew would take us all the way back in the genealogies, all the way to Abraham, and Luke would go even further, because remember, Luke was Paul's companion. So Luke at least said, well, let's just go beyond Abraham this time. Let's go all the way to Adam, the Son of God. And when John begins his writing, he says, in the beginning was the Word. And that Word did not distract from anything that God is. And that Word became flesh. I'm busy with translation every day of my life, so I really enjoy the wealth of words. But the best translation is always the Incarnation. Because the destiny of the Word was not the book, not even a leather-bound book. In our young days, Lydia and I were involved in leather work. We were like hippies, just making sandals and belts and Bible covers. But that you are the best Bible cover. Because God has found such a volume to His voice in ordinary human life. The moment we awaken to the reality that the book was never meant for the shelf, just meant for me. The whole book's about one person, and this complete person is completely about you. He articulates God's faith, God's belief in you. Jesus is what God believes about you. God cannot be bolder or louder than what He is in sonship. And that resonance defeats all doubt. You see, doubt's not defeated by argument. God is so convinced about His workmanship, and He's so persuaded that you are His work of art. In Ephesians 2:10, Paul uses the Greek word poema, where we get our word poem from, when he says that we are His workmanship. Have you ever considered that you are God's poem? You see, a poem is not just a conglomeration of words to try and fill the page. Poems can sometimes be very short, very brief, but it carries such inspiration. And you're God's inspired thought. He imagined you before your parents knew you. He imagined this being in whom He could find unrestricted expression. In your voice, in your face, in every feature that you are. God is not embarrassed about the human body. Paul says in in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 7, he says, we have this treasure in an earthen vessel. But a few verses before that he says, but the God of this world blindfolds our minds. Not our minds, he says, the minds of the unbeliever. To keep them from seeing what? The light of the gospel. So what is the light of the gospel all about? Did Jesus come to just introduce a new Christian philosophy this time? Let's steer away from the Buddhist and the Muslim and the Moses religion. Let's just start a new religion called Christianity. No. The true light that enlightens every man has come. God announced a brand new day in a light that unveils the glory of God. Go and read it in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4. The glory of God, not captured in a beautiful sentence that we can eventually become our doctrine. But the glory of God, the doxa is the Greek word, the glory, the original intent, the blueprint of God's mind, revealed in the face of a man. And a few verses before, Paul says in chapter 3 of verse 18, it's from 2 Corinthians, he says, now we all with unveiled faces. Yes. Remember, the God of this world wanted to do what? Veil our minds. The minds of who? The unbeliever. The one who does not believe the truth about himself. The one who believes a lie about himself. The one who forgets what manner of person I am. Because I have all these contradictions and references. What people say, my teacher said that about me. My friends and my fellows declared that over my life. But there's an unveiling. The most liberating moment of your life happens in that unveiling, where we all, with unveiled faces, behold. It's not just a little glance, it's a behold. We've just come back from the bush. We love the bush. We used to run a small lodge and safaris in the Eastern Transvaal, in Sabi Game Reserve, and we used to love taking people on these guided tours and just give them the opportunity to experience what they've read in the brochure. And we've been blessed to see some beautiful sights, birds, leopards, you name it, the whole thing's all there. I mean, you don't bring it there, it's already there, you just go, behold. But you know what you do when you find a leopard? We found a few on this last trip, and some were quite hidden, Some people would look and just drive on because they don't really see it. We don't tick it off, oh, we've got the leopardos on the left in that tree, and there we go. No. You stop. You bring out the binoculars, and you focus in, and the camera's there, and it's like, just got to capture this. Just got to capture this, and zoom in. Bring that leopard close. We all, with unveiled faces, beholding the doxa, the glory of God. Never again as in a display window. That was Old Testament. That was just advertising, pointing towards. But as in a mirror. I don't have to spend one more day gazing into a display window with crossed fingers and hoping that I could also say that one day, or think that one day, or have that one day, or be that, or become that maybe. The ugly duckling was not staring a potential swan in the face. And yet we've reduced most of Christian theology to exactly that. The language of the Old Testament is do in order to become. The language of the New is be because of what was done. There is an unveiling. Jesus did not come as an example for you. He came as the example of you. So that with unveiled faces we may discover ourselves. Simon, son of Jonah, that's a nice name, but it doesn't define you. Flesh and blood cannot define you. I say, you are rock. Before the days of the hard drive, there was the rock. You want to find the oldest testimony of life, you're going to find yourself a fossil. It's trapped there in that rock. So God would use this picture throughout the Old Testament. He sings through Moses a song in Deuteronomy 32. He says, ascribe greatness to our God, the rock. His work is perfect. You see, God did not rest on the seventh day because he felt rather exhausted. He doesn't grow weary. His Sabbath celebrates perfection. Like when an artist that finally signs his name and puts down the brush cannot add another stroke to that canvas. Ascribe greatness to our God. We sing beautiful songs, how great is our God, and we keep the question mark big. The heavens cannot measure him. We get all thrills and goosebumps when we stare into the expanse and we think, oh, God is bigger than that. And so what is man? And we shrink into insignificance compared to the vastness of outer space. And Jesus says, you're using the wrong instrument. You cannot measure temperature with a ruler. His work is perfect. This is Deuteronomy 32, the beginning of the chapter. And then verse 18 says, but you have forgotten the rock that begot you. Isaiah 51 verse 1 says, you seek God. You pursue righteousness. Here's your clue. Look to the rock from which you were hewn, the quarry from which you were dug. God has not lost trace or record of your design. We can get confused with our filing system sometimes. Look for a document. We knew we had it, but it's gone. God has you on record. Because you once were lost, but in him you are found. And the gospel simply comes to conclude that beautiful love poem in 1 Corinthians 13, so that we may now know, even as we have always been known. Yes. You might have been a surprise to your parents, but he's always known you. And God has no other agenda but to unveil. So now with unveiled faces, we may behold his glory. Not some religious replica. It's like buying a Rolex watch from the street corner, made in Hong Kong. But the authority, the integrity, the authentic, that declares you face to face the brother of Jesus, not one of his brothers, by the way, believed in him during the times of his ministry. Says John 7, chapter 7, verse 5. Isn't that sad? Not one of his family. I mean, he was kicked out of the house. Remember, in the beginning, when his first miracle, I mean, he became so famous. I mean, everybody claimed, I'm a relative of this man who turns water into wine. Until he kicked over some tables in the temple and became rather unpopular. So much so that Jesus had to say at one point, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests. But I've lost my address because he became less popular with his family. It was only after his resurrection that he appeared also to James. I'm so glad that James, one of the unbelieving brothers, discovered in the resurrection the face of his birth. Yes. And he starts writing. Jesus' younger brother James. In James chapter 1 and verse 17 he says, the Father of light, with whom there is, he says, every good and perfect gift. I like those words, good, perfect gift. You cannot add to perfection, can you? You cannot earn gift, can you? Now we're talking reward language again, that's law. Gift comes anuthen, says the Greeks, from above. Where we come from. We've translated it in John 3 verse 3 to be born again. The Greek word is to be born from above. Because my mother's womb cannot define me. I didn't begin there. I have forgotten the rock that begot me. But it's come to reveal again the face of my birth. Suddenly James discovers our identity, our genesis was not Mary's womb. Every good and perfect gift, anuthen, from above, from the Father of light. We're not talking daylight here. Remember, he created light before he created the suns and the moons. The Father of light, the God who said that light shine out of darkness, who shone into our hearts. Not to confuse us, not to condemn us, but to enlighten our understanding. He shone into our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the doxa, the glory, the original idea of God. Do you know that you are the greatest idea that God had ever had? Yes. His doxa in the face of a man called Jesus Christ, who mirrors you. And so James says that this God, who is the Father of light, with whom there is no hidden agenda, no shadow due to change, nothing that intercepts this light. And verse 18 says he gave birth to us. Maybe I could just read it to you from the Mirror translation. Yeah. James chapter 1 is just such a mouthful. He gave birth to us, he says in verse 18, by the word of truth. You see, the truth about you carries the authentic authority. It's your true identity. God is not in make-believe mode, trying to think happy thoughts about you, so that hopefully one day you'll become that. The ugly duckling did not see a potential swan that still needed a few facelifts and a few courses on how to fake the swan life. Fake it until you make it. Jesus says you will know the truth. How will we know the truth? By embracing truth in its most complete context in the Incarnation, in the person of Christ. Every prophecy, every psalm, every bit of history that Moses wrote down reflects him. He says you'll know the truth. And what will happen? You get clever? Think, well, I've added another degree to my name. There it is, stamped on my wall. He says know your freedom. Truth always translates into freedom. Yes. Freedom is the most valuable life to live. It's a life that cannot be broken into. You're not defined by what you've lost. I had to find that out yesterday. Not defined by what I might possibly gain someday in the future when I get my laptop back. Here Paul spoke these words from a prison cell. One would think, why didn't God just wait with all this, 2,000 years. Imagine if we could just have the technology we have now and then have Jesus go and perform his miracles and tell his parables and die and be resurrected. And we could capture that and sell TV rights. It'll sponsor every mission, wouldn't it? There is nothing in the far future that technology could touch that can match you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Terabyte, 1,000 gigabytes. One DNA strand, it was written when you were conceived, carries 3 billion characters. You try and count those characters one by one at a second per character. It will take you 96 years. And you have 75 trillion of them in your body. What is man that thou art so mindful of him? What would God find so attractive about you? There is a treasure in the earthen vessel. Your skin is not to veil him from you, but to unveil him in human life. Nothing makes your life more dynamic, more attractive than your awakening to the truth of your original identity, your original value, your original innocence, redeemed. So he brought us forth by the word of truth. God's word had only one mission: to birth his life, to articulate his word in the Incarnation. So that flesh, human design, would express it. We love nature. We love the flowers. We live against the mountain there in Hermanus, and almost daily we go for our walks. One of our most difficult decisions every day: shall we go and do the cliff bath or go to the mountain? Tough life in Hermanus. But there is nothing that you could ever witness in nature that can match you. God has redeemed such space in your inner man, your innermost being. There's so much more to you than your pretty smile. There's so much more than what meets the eye. Your innermost being is the very expression of God. Out of your innermost being. We thought at least Jesus would refer us to something great that he is. But his greatness cannot be appreciated in any other context but in you, in human life. For so long we've worshipped this external idea of a distant God. God, you are so wonderful. Oh, you are so holy. And we thought we've really done it. And then the same James writes in chapter 3 verse 9, he says, how can we say nice things about God and curse a man who's made in his image in the same breath? Your worship cannot be divorced from your opinion of yourself, because he redeemed his likeness, his image in you. God is nie verleë oor jou nie. Hy is nie eers verleë oor jou lyf nie. Al is die ding so bietjie oorgewig. I'm just speaking a little bit of tongues here. It's wonderful. I'm reading James 1:18. It was his delightful resolve to give birth to us. Might as well read verse 17. Without exception, God's gifts are only good. Its perfection cannot be improved upon. They come from above, anuthen, proceeding like light rays from its source, the Father of lights, with whom there is no distortion, or even a shadow of shifting to obstruct or intercept the light. No hint of a hidden agenda. It was his delightful resolve to give birth to us. We were conceived by the unveiled logic of God. The word logic, logos, the word truth, aletheia, means literally to unveil that which is hidden. You see, a diamond doesn't become a diamond when you discover it. We grew up in a farm right next to Cullinan Mine. And I still walk a little bit with my shoulders like this because my father told us, jy moet rondkyk. Because if we can discover one of them, we won't need to plow again. For so long, we've made our own labor our reference. And then Jesus says, you say there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest. But let me give you a good idea about this harvest. It'll disappoint you yet again. You're looking at the wrong harvest. I want you to lift up your eyes. I want you to see a harvest in full view, not distorted through my little bit that I have to bring, and then God would possibly meet me halfway. That's called religion. It's a cul-de-sac. Dead end street. But he says, I want you to lift up your eyes. I want to show you a harvest. This is in John chapter 4. A harvest that is already ripe. You ask any farmer. Now, sir, when is a harvest ripe? How can I tell? It's easy. It's when the seed in the fruit matches the seed that was sown. But it's going to take 4 months, isn't it? Not in the harvest I'm about to reveal. It only took 3 days. You see, religion thrives on 2 lies: distance and delay. Religion needs paying and returning customers. But he says, I want you to lift up your eyes. I want you to see you like you've never seen you before. There's a harvest that defines you, and it's already ripe. Destroy this temple, says John in John 2 verse 19. Well, he quotes Jesus. Jesus says, destroy this temple. Can you imagine the Jews, how they responded to this? I mean, their temple was the most holy address on planet Earth. And here this man says, destroy this temple. Dangerous talk. And he says, in 3 days I will raise it up. They thought, no. We're in a different economy. I mean, it took us 46 years. Doesn't it know 46 years? 6 years longer than it took Israel to go and die in the desert of unbelief. He said, I want to show you another temple. Even Peter got it. Remember, he was John's partner. Couldn't write until much later. And he starts off his writings in 1 Peter 1 verse 3. He says, we were born anew. When? When Jesus was raised from the dead. You see, truth doesn't become true by popular vote. Once you believe it. No. It's from faith to faith. What we believe about ourselves and about God is irrelevant. It's called philosophy, guess, religion, doctrine. But what really matters is the faith of God. And God's faith reveals His mind made up. Jesus is God's mind made up about you. What a wonderful reference. What a confident gospel. Paul says, I'm not ashamed of this gospel. There are a few other gospels that I'd rather be embarrassed about. But this one I'm not ashamed of. Because this one unveils truth in such context that it appeals to every man's conscience. The word conscience, suneido in the Greek, means to see together. In the bush when we had our safaris, we would see a leopard, but rather hidden away. And we would just point our guests in the right direction. And then you watch their faces. You watch how the frown turns into a glow. And immediately they want to include everyone else in the vehicle or in the group if we walk. Because, there is the reference. It's in your face. We're not here guessing about an invisible God. Paul says in Colossians 1:15 with such beauty, he says, Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Do you know what that means? That God can never again be invisible. He has overlooked the times of ignorance. Ignorance can never again be a valid veil to hide God from us. We all, with open faces. And in the previous chapter 3, Paul says, living epistles is who we are. Not trying to sponsor someone's new interpretation about God, but living epistles, radiating the message that appeals to every man's conscience. And by the way, the word conscience, suneido, has an opposite called hades. Ha-ides, not to see. The gates of Hades shall not prevail. Against who? Against my ecclesia. We've translated the word church. And the moment I say church, we get all kinds of ideas floating through our minds. But when Jesus introduces the word in Matthew 16, from verse 13, he uses it specifically in the context of this amazing question. Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? What a question. And they had the immediate ideas and doctrines about who he could possibly be. And then he said, but who do you say that I am? And by revelation, Simon said, Jesus, you are the Christ. You are everything that the Scriptures foretold. You are what the Bible is all about. You're the Christ. You are the promise. The promise is no longer some shadow reference, some Jewish ritual. But the promise is a person. You are it. The Son of the living God. How did Jesus respond to him? Well, Simon, I didn't think you'd get that. I mean, that's brilliant. Congratulations. Here's your Sunday school certificate. You got your theology right. I'm so glad Jesus said what he did. He said, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. That was the way he knew, and everybody else knew him. He knew himself by son of Jonah. Jonah's my dad. Bar Jonah is the Aramaic for I'm son of Jonah. I say, you are rock. Now that you know who I am, Simon, allow me to introduce you to you. Look to the rock from which you were hewn. And upon this rock, Petros, Petra. Petros is that chip of the old block. Petra is the rock face. Upon this revelation. What revelation? That the Son of Man did not begin in his mother's womb. The Son of Man, man began in God. This revelation. I will build my ecclesia. The word ecclesia, interesting Greek word too. It's a compound word. The word ek is a preposition in the Greek, and it always denotes to origin. It denotes origin and it denotes source. Ecclesia, kaleo. We've translated kaleo mostly with call, but its more accurate meaning is to surname, to identify by name. Remember when Moses begins his song in Deuteronomy 32? He says, I want to acknowledge, what is the Greek? I want to make known the name of the Lord. He calls heaven and earth as his audience. He says, I want to make known the name of the Lord. Why? Because we have forgotten the God who gave birth to us. He says, I want to make him known to you. Ascribe greatness to God, the rock. His work is perfect. Upon this rock, I will build ecclesia, the original identity. And you know what? The gates of Hades shall not prevail against you. If you read that and really understand it, it's so simple. You realize that, listen, what God is expressing through human life will touch planet Earth, where people's minds are snared and trapped in an idea about themselves and their neighbors that carries no relevance whatsoever. Hades doesn't have what it takes to continue to blindfold. The devil cannot do anything without man's permission. Remember, he was defeated on the cross. And by the way, the word diabolos, devil, dia, because of or through, balo, to cast up, down, to fall. It's literally translated as the accuser. The accuser of man has lost his right to blackmail you. Because in that same moment where the document of guilt was nailed to the cross, God stripped the devil of all authority. He took away what? The weapon. What was the weapon? My guilt. So when the weapon is removed, he's lost his power over me. So why would the God of this world have the ability to blindfold the mind? Paul says, with your permission. And what is your permission? My unbelief, Paul calls it. Now remember why Israel died in the wilderness? In Hebrews chapter 4 we read that they died not through a lack of manna or a lack of supernatural manifestations, exposure, cold at night, sunstroke by day. They didn't get enough quails. They couldn't quite feed 1 million mouths today. Why did they die? Through unbelief. What was Israel's unbelief all about? Just one thing. They believed a lie about themselves. Remember when their leaders went out to spy the land? What report they came back with? Numbers 13:33. We are grasshoppers. I'm telling you, those guys that we saw there, they're bigger than Pharaoh could ever imagine to be. Maybe God could defeat Pharaoh, but listen guys, let's be realistic. Here we are in the wilderness and God's providing for us. So why don't we just hang around? Isn't God's mercy something else? And we thought, okay, well Canaan must be, soos altyd gesing het, daar bo in die hemelse Kanaan. Kyk uit vir my, kyk uit vir jou. We've reduced the whole gospel to a future event. As if God really blew it. God just didn't get it right the first time. Again. They believed a lie. They bought into a lie. 10 out of the 12 leaders. Remember, they were not volunteer spies. They were selected leaders. They represented their 12 tribes. And 10 out of the 12 came. And the majority vote said, we've voted, they are giants. Now Caleb and Joshua, you've got nothing. You just shut up, zip your lip. They're giants. That whole generation, except Joshua and Caleb, died. Not because God delivered them, defeated Pharaoh in an inferior way. It wasn't Pharaoh that caused their death in the wilderness. What we've done is we have preached the devil, a defeated devil, back into business again. You come with us on trips in Africa and you'll see how the church proclaims witchcraft and the devil this. And we've preached him back into business. And he loves it. Because Numbers 13:33 reduced man to a little dwarf being called image of God. No, image of grasshopper. Giants. You fast forward that little bit of history to Joshua 2:11. This time now Joshua takes over. Remember, now all the other guys died, so he takes over the new generation. And this time he's not risking 12 spies. He just sends out 2. And those 2 meet Rahab, and she tells them what really happened. When she heard that they were the Israelis, she said, come on, we heard about your salvation. We heard how your God delivered you out of Pharaoh's hand, how he drowned the whole Egyptian army. Let me tell you, there was not one man in our midst who was not shivering in his shoes or sandals. That was the truth. But we've invented all these truths that re-empowered the defeated foe because of one reason only. We believe a lie about ourselves. The God of this world, this is 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4. The God of this world blindfolds the minds of the who? the unbeliever. To keep them from seeing the what? The light of the gospel, the good news. I mean, good news is only good news if it's good news. The best news is completely irrelevant if you feel excluded. And yet God comes and announces good news of great joy. There's no joy that can match the joy of salvation. When the woman found that coin, she stopped everything. She called in the neighbor. She says, we're going to have a party, man. We're going to celebrate that which was lost is found again. There's a festive sound in the gospel that you cannot escape. It gets you tapping your foot, even when they've stolen your MacBook Air. And you think, oh, that must be very difficult. Of course it is. The flesh can't do it. It's impossible. It's not difficult, it's impossible. But you make a calculation where you count it all joy. Where there's a joy that surpasses any idea of loss. Wrong measure. The joy of the Lord. What's that? That's His joy. What's that? That's you. You are His joy. And if you cannot interfere with God's joy, I mean, who can? The joy of the Lord. The peace of God that passes all understanding. Keeps your heart and mind. You see, for God, for us it's all about Jesus, but for Jesus it's all about you. We think, no, it's not about me, it's just about Jesus. Then you miss the point. Because for Him it's all about you. His name spells out your salvation. So that out of your innermost being, rivers of living water will flow. Because there's a thirsty world out there that's living in the illusion of distance, separation, delay. The time's not yet. Maybe judgment will finally come in 2012. Didn't happen last year. Remember what was the date again? But this year, wow. When the Father judges no one, and all judgment was given to the Son. And remember when Jesus announces in John chapter 12, He says, now is the judgment of this world. Can you imagine the goosebumps going, whoa, here come moeilikheid, the weerligstraal. We thought, God had this anger management problem. And every now and again He had to relieve Himself with another tsunami, and with another AIDS epidemic. And Jesus had to just stand there and just, be our intercessor and just try and keep God's moods down. And here He comes and He declares, now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world is cast out. What was His rule all about? Deception. He's not the father of one human cell. He's the father of lies. He was cast out when the document of guilt was nailed to a wooden cross. And he became a curse to cancel the curse. And the next verse says, and I, Jesus says, and I, when I'm lifted up. And the verse after that says what He's talking about, what manner of death He was about to die. When I'm lifted up, just like Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, when I'm lifted up, will draw all. Most translations read, men unto me. But notice that in many of the translations, the men is in cursive. So it's not there in the original text. I will draw all what? All judgment unto me. You see, if we can discover that our redemption includes the redemption of our innocence, we immediately find a place where we are cuddled in God's embrace. You are not just tolerated. God is just trying to be polite towards you. He cannot get you out of His mind.
Glory.
Because when He sees you, He has always known you.
Yes.
And His complete dealing with you is to introduce you to yourself again. Simon, son of Jonah, allow me to introduce you to you, Mr. Rock. And upon this rock, I will build my ecclesia. And what I'm able to communicate and to declare through your life carries a resonance that cannot be hidden. Carries an authority that makes the gates, the strong gates of Hades, crumble. Drug addicts hear a voice and something in them responds in an amen. Not through some little ritual trying to do it less, but hearing the truth that Jesus says. You're so truth compatible by design. You know what truth does? It sets you free. How do I relate to my freedom? To my Maker finding expression in me. He has found a voice in you. You're His poem. God has written poetry when He wrote your name. God is so convinced about you. So convinced that He pleads through us with an already reconciled world. Not to become reconciled, to be reconciled. You see, light does not create something, it unveils something that's already there. The treasure hidden in an earthen vessel is on display again in human life. Nothing complements the word more than you. You complement the word of God. God's word finds such a wonderful language in you. It's not an example for you, but an example of you. Let's just gaze today. Let's just gaze into the mirror and discover His beauty just bouncing off that mirror in a resonance that says, Abba Father. A resonance that echoes, Amen. I agree with God about me. There's a little song that's in my heart, wat in van 'n gebruik. So that's Your word is near unto me. It's in my mouth and my heart. I see there the face of my birth. Now I know as I've always been known. For as you are, so am I. My life is revealed in you. Oh Lord, of your fullness have we all received, and we are complete in you. Your word is near unto me. It's in my mouth and my heart. I see that face of my birth. Now I know as I've always been known. For as you are, so am I. My life is revealed in you. Oh Lord, of your fullness have we all received, and we are complete in you. Oh Lord, of your fullness have we all received, and we are complete in you. Have we all received? We are complete in you. Amen.
Oh, glory.
Thank you. Awesome.